actually is taking out people who lived, did commerce, and had businesses. They're now gone.
Highways caused tremendous social rifts in communities and just tore people apart.
For decades, highways were sold as progress. A promise to connect America, to drive prosperity to our cities. But in places like Rochester, New York, that promise came with a cost. One they're still recovering from today. And a warning for every city considering the same mistakes. Because once you realize what happened here, you might start to wonder, were we all scammed? The inner loop was built to connect, to modernize, but it ended up dividing.
The inner loop was constructed primarily as a sort of circulator to be able to access downtown. If you lived in the suburbs, you could access downtown really without having to go through the street grid. So from 1952 to 1965 in sections, they built the inner loop to allow people basically to do that.
Like so many neighborhoods across America, Rochester sacrificed its thriving neighborhoods for the promise of progress through modern highways. The result? Decades of economic stagnation, social fragmentation, and the exodus of residents that left their once vibrant neighborhood abandoned.
Who really was displaced?
Yeah.
And when we looked at the database, city directories, we could find names of people, a lot of immigrant names, Mrs. So-and-so, a lot of widows, a lot of names from all over the world. You had Italian, Polish, you had black and brown, but mostly, it was a real mixture. And it was, I think, honestly, they created blight so they had an excuse to destroy some of it.
You know, that tore apart communities. And those are rifts that are still being felt today. Those are wounds that are still being felt today. The inner loop created a moat, basically, in neighborhoods such that, you know, they used to be able to just cross the street and go to a friend's house, and now they had to, you know, walk a mile to a bridge and circle back, right? That's what these projects did. They caused tremendous social rifts in communities and just tore people apart.
You would see people trying to run across the depressed highway to get from one side to the other because there are relatively few crossings.
Planners at the time decided, well, you know, we're going to prioritize getting cars in and out of the city center. And they literally ripped up the fabric of what downtown was.
First you built this ditch, then you took away our neighborhood schools, you took away our grocery stores, our businesses, and you could see them all being closed.
Rochester certainly wasn't the only city to fall victim to this idea of progress.
One segment of a great national system of highways that one day soon will connect the major cities of our land.
Across the country, highways were sold as the future, the key to better cities. And yes, in some places, the interstate highway did bring along economic growth by connecting major metropolitan areas. But in many ways, we overbuilt, bringing more economic decline in the long run, and for the most vulnerable, those affected by these decisions. That price was steep. And the thing is, that price is still being paid today.
These houses have the highway in their backyard, literally in their backyard. So you can see there's houses here, there's neighborhoods, there's people, so you can get a feel. This is still the sort of feel that was here prior to the inner loop.
Even now, highway expansion projects are happening in cities across the U.S. Not because the people of those cities are asking for them, but because the federal government is paying for them.
And a controlled access highway is based on these traffic count figures.
This federal money isn't allocated based on the needs of local communities or the impact on neighborhoods. It's simply a continuation of the system to force these cities to accept these projects as progress. The Highway Trust Fund, originally designed to help build the interstate highway system, continues to push cities to build and widen roads they don't need. Since 2014, the U.S. public interest groups found 73 unnecessary or wasteful highway projects slated to cost at least $173 billion in taxpayer money. As long as the federal government continues to write those checks, cities are incentivized to keep expanding highways, even when they don't want them, and when they can't afford the long-term consequences. But these highways aren't just costing us in dollars. They're paying for the same mistakes we made decades ago. We're repeating history. But here's the real question. If federal money is keeping the cycle alive, what will it take to break it? What will it take for cities to reject endless expansion? To turn away from a policy that destroys neighborhoods and damages communities? In Rochester, the fight to reverse this mistake didn't begin with a wave of federal money, but with local visionaries and advocates who realized it was time to change course. It took decades of disinvestment, suffering, and abandonment to get to this point. A city scarred by a highway that should never have been. But in Rochester's story, we see the possibility of renewal, a chance to reclaim what was lost. In 2014, Rochester took its first significant step towards reconciliation, a $24 million project to fill in an eastern portion of the Inner Loop.
The Inner Loop East project here, where we removed a 2/3 mile segment of grade-separated highway on the southeast side of downtown Rochester. Our goal was, if you remove the highway and you come back in 10, 15, 20 years, you'll never know that there was a highway here because we built a community here. And there's people out walking and biking and grabbing coffee and living life, right?
An effort to reconnect neighborhoods that had been severed for decades. It wasn't a quick fix. It was a necessary correction. A recognition that the damage done could never be undone, but at least could begin to heal.
These highways cast a pall on the communities that they land within. As we look to eliminate these highways, you should be able to do the exact opposite, which is return some wealth back to the communities that suffered when these highways were built. And at the same time, as you look at what can be built on lands that replace it, you have to think about how that land can be productive for residents that have lived or were displaced by the highway in the first place.
Over the years, the transformation has been remarkable. New apartments, green spaces, restaurants have breathed new life into the area. And with it, a sense of hope and renewal.
We're going into a store that was sitting on top of the Inner Loop. Oh, morning. As we come inside, we can tell this is actually it's a community hub here, fresh fruits and vegetables, fresh meats. So it's great to have this hub in a community that, once again, that didn't exist. This was a highway, so now we've got a great store owners, and people that are invested and connected.
And the expansion of the Strong Museum, which is a great family resource. This expansion into the Inner Loop space was meant to increase their yearly visitorship from 600,000 to 1 million people.
But as with any major change, questions loom over the impact on the people who have lived here the longest.
1 in 4 households here doesn't have access to a private vehicle. In some of the neighborhoods adjacent to Inner Loop, it's 1 in 2. So it's a real problem. So part of what we're trying to accomplish is knitting back together a street grid, kind of similar to what was here before the Inner Loop was constructed.
And so we've been advocating to the city and everyone else who's involved in making those decisions from the county, state, and federal level that we need to continue to build the network together, and we call it the bike spine network. Once we get done with this, we'll have a spine of interconnected, safe, protected infrastructure that will be accessible for people of all ages and abilities to enjoy. And then that will be supported by a lot of supportive bike corridors that connect neighborhoods and destinations.
Before we continue, we want to thank our partners at the Center for Civic Engagement for making this video possible. We're proud to team up with them for the Civic Leaders Summit, a national conference on civic engagement, happening September 23rd through September 25th this year in Pensacola, Florida. The summit will help you get local with actionable strategies, practical tools and tactics, and impactful connections. You'll learn how to bring positive change to your community, just like Rochester has. The agenda is full of people who are in the trenches doing that work right now, and who are committed to bringing tried and true strategies to help communities solve their toughest problems. For more information, be sure to check out the link in our description. Now back to the video. We tend to think highways are free, paid for by the gas tax and the federal government. But here's the truth. Building a highway is just the beginning. Cities are responsible for maintaining them forever, and that gets expensive fast.
It costs us as taxpayers more money to keep up this failing, crumbling infrastructure than to do something else with it. So if you don't have a productive use for the parcel, then you're not generating any tax revenue. And a sunken highway is really actually sucking the resources out of the city.
In fact, only about half of all road spending comes from drivers. The rest, it comes from general taxes, sales tax, property tax, money that could be funding schools, fire departments, and fixing water mains. So why do we keep building roads? Partly because the federal government pays us to. Remember the Highway Trust Fund that we mentioned earlier? States get reimbursed for up to 90% of highway construction costs. That's a deal cities can't resist, especially when local budgets are tight. But here's the catch. Those funds only cover building the highways, not maintaining them. So cities take on massive liabilities in exchange for short-term cash.
Yeah, so this is where the inner loop restarts, right? So it used to come off of this turn and just shoot straight down there. Now it kind of winds back and joins the street grid. So the idea was, do you spend $50 million to repair that decay, or do you spend $22 million to create more developable space, which we have? And as you can see, there's very little traffic usage. I think that decision worked out okay.
And the trust fund itself, it's been insolvent since 2008, kept alive by $275 billion in emergency bailouts from Congress. That's not sustainable, that's not smart, that's not local decision making. It's infrastructure by subsidy. And here's where it gets worse. Most of the roads we build are meant to serve low density, car dependent development. Here's a textbook example of this created by our friends at Urban 3, a firm that analyzes the relationship between building design and tax production. Okay, so check out this illustration. It shows the tax value of a big box store near Asheville, North Carolina, compared with a modest downtown building. Pay special attention to the taxes per acre. The more buildings are spread apart with half-empty parking lots and more roads, the less that land is worth on a tax scale.
So we actually have used Urban 3's analysis and some of the videos that they've produced here locally in Rochester to talk about value per acre and land use decisions. So when we are, often we'll hear about a new economic development project that's been greenlit and being given some state funding, but it's being built somewhere really far removed from the public transit lines. And so anytime that happens, we pull out our public transit map and we highlight the lines that are going out from the city center. There's kind of a spider of lines that go out, and it said, how come nobody thought to locate this economic development opportunity along a corridor that's already served by public transit? Because when you do that, you have a multiplier effect. You have the public transit is serving the economic development, the employees can get to work in a much simpler timeline, and the value per acre around that area tends to go up, and it generates tax revenue for the city.
So I do think that a lesson learned from Rochester is that especially where state DOTs will listen, cities taking the lead and saying, we will, if this highway is removed, we will take over the infrastructure that's here, we'll maintain it, it'll be ours. That's got to be part of that give and take I mentioned before, right? It's the benefit cost of it all, right? When the state is looking at spending millions of dollars, they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on maintenance, whether it's snow removal, pothole patching, highway lighting, things like that, or when there's repairs that are required, whether it's the bridges that go over the highway, the retaining walls, the sign structures, all of that comes at a significant cost. So if you look at the benefit cost for this project, it was easily answered just by virtue of that. The life cycle maintenance cost of repairing this highway versus building something different and the life cycle costs of maintaining this. It didn't even necessarily have to take into consideration all the development, all the commerce that would result, the public health and safety benefits of creating a community. You know, cities need to be mindful of that when they get into these conversations.
Once these highways are built, they're incredibly hard to remove, and their impact is lasting. Best way to prevent the destruction of neighborhoods and communities is through early, proactive engagement. When projects like these are proposed, it's crucial that communities come together, share their voices, and fight for what they value most.
The city of Rochester is now filling in the inner loop, and it is a correction to the history of urban renewal, right? So that in making housing more affordable so that people can actually move back into their neighborhoods and be community again. And I think it's a wonderful thing that is happening. You know, our church will be kind of off to the right of all of the action, and it'll just be great to see, you know, new communities forming and vibrancy.
Talk about bike infrastructure like this, or where they talk about, you know, building upon an old underutilized sunken highway. I really didn't think this was going to happen in my city. You know, I came from Chicago, I loved it, it was great, but you don't think you're going to have those elements in a city like Rochester, especially when it was where it was 20 years ago. And now we have some of those elements. And it makes me think that anything's possible. And it's so easy to get down on our cities, our communities, and what's wrong. And I see so much that's going right. And there's still more to come. There's a lot more work to do, especially at the granular level, at the social level. But I've seen progress that I never thought I'd see here, and I am truly inspired by it.
If we're serious about building stronger, more sustainable communities, we have to stop pouring money into new highways and lane expansions. Connect with others who want to stop highway expansion by becoming a Strong Towns member.